Here with Grant House, a former ASU swimmer who is the lead plaintiff in the House v. NCAA settlement case that recently received final approval this past Friday, making it possible for schools to pay athletes directly up to an annual salary cap of $20.5 million. Also, the NCAA will pay $2.8 billion in back damages to athletes who competed in college from 2016 through present day. One of those athletes is you, Grant, who competed during that time frame. And I want to take it back to where it all started in 2020 when you first filed this suit. What were your motivations and intentions behind filing this lawsuit against the NCAA?
Yeah, great question, Blake. A lot of my motivations came from the foundation of where I started at Arizona State and just the empowering that I had long before that, too, of being the best athlete I can be and pursuing my potential at the highest levels. When I came about this opportunity, I leading into it in 2020, I saw it as rewriting the DNA of college sports. And so athletes could have more ownership in their stories, support their own future, their families, their friends, their livelihoods outside of just playing the sport, and finally have a real seat at the table. And when this opportunity came about that I would be able to impact and help athletes get more autonomy, more ownership at the hundreds of thousands of levels and millions going forward, it was an incredible opportunity that I wanted to have the courage for and wanted to step forward for all athletes in all sports, because I saw it as a no-brainer to give athletes more opportunities, more security, more allocations, and more autonomy for their own careers and their livelihood. Seemed like a no-brainer to me and just a great cause that I wanted to be a part of.
And Grant, this has been an uphill battle over the past 5 years. It's been a lengthy process. How has this been for you and the difficulties and challenging process that it's taken to get to this point today?
Yeah, it's been a long 5 years for sure. At the start of this process, not knowing really how big the magnitude can be. At the time, I thought it was just college athletes. And, as time progressed, unfolding that it's the future of all college athletes for the rest of time, if this gets approved and when it got approved. Because I really felt like this case was never a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And we've seen examples like this before with Jeremy Bloom, with Ed O'Bannon, Sean Alston, and these examples of kind of knocking on the door and having one example to kind of finally have the courage to knock down the door completely and correct these wrongs and really reshape the system that wasn't just broken, but it was built on aspects that were just inequitable for all athletes.
And you mentioned the changing of the system, now putting in place salary caps available, back damages being paid. What were your reactions to those amounts and how it played out? Did it play out the way you had hoped and anticipated?
I think obviously getting the settlement approved was the ultimate goal at the end of this, to see that just rightful action for college athletes. There were many things along the way that were uncontrollable to any of my actions or desires or visions too. It was a learning process every day, and I think the biggest thing that emphasizes that point is in this final review process of getting the lawsuit approved or denied. Obviously, it was approved, but I think it took over almost 7 to 8 weeks longer than people had really projected. And with the notice coming on Friday night at 9 p.m. for most people last week, 8 days ago now, it really emphasizes and epitomizes that it was really a lot of this was out of a lot of people's control of when it was going to happen, what the decisions were going to be made under Judge Claudia Wilkins' honor and analysis. And so I think it was just addressing it each day as much as you can and learning how to respond along the way and not react. That was one of the biggest things that I learned, because there were multiple times where it'd be waking up to a day of 300 messages, waking up to a day of 20 calls, waking up to headlines across prevalent media outlets with my name on it, being bombarded with social media messages on all my platforms. It was a learning curve of how to be resilient and learning how to control my mental and emotional state and respond rather than react, because I realized as it went on each day, I was the face of this for college athletes everywhere, not just myself, not just my team, not just my family, but hundreds of thousands of athletes everywhere. And if I respond the incorrect way, it doesn't set a good example for what this can become and the positive change that this will make going forward.
You mentioned some of those threats and the public reaction to this case and this lawsuit coming down. How difficult and hard was it to deal with some of that public reaction and getting through that?
Yeah, it was extremely challenging. It was something I'd never encountered really before. Obviously, as an athlete, you have some people that want to beat you in a race that don't want you to win, but that's just nature of the beast. But when you have mothers, fathers, people of your own sport, peers reaching out to you and just projecting negativity and projecting threatening comments to your life, your well-being, your safety on a daily basis, it became pretty shocking to the point where I just had to remove those from my life completely. I took a break from social media, hopped off all social media platforms for over 10 weeks. There was an app that I used to just remove it from my phone, saying it was over 2,000 hours that I was away from social media. And it kind of epitomized everything in my belief that everyone that was providing this negativity in my life was never in arm reach, was never in my closer circle, or was never someone that knew the day to day, knew who Grant House was, and knew that I never did this to tear down any sports. I just did this to give all athletes in every sport a better opportunity and a better future. And it was quite stark to see the differences of once my name was attached to this, how it progressed over time and got worse and worse, and leading to a pretty much a peak and a pinnacle of the negative aspects I was being inundated with from after Olympic trials in 2024 around August and September till March of 2025 this year. It was just quite alarming and shocking to see what people resort to when they just don't agree with an aspect or a sentiment that you believe in.
And Grant, with you being an Olympic swimmer, the revenue distribution model has been discussed a lot on how that's going to affect sports like yours, the Olympic sports. How do you think that model will impact those kind of athletes?
I think the changes going forward will encourage and demand also every sport across the board, especially Olympic sports, to become more engaging, more entertaining, and require a little bit more effort to facilitate those things to happen. Whether it's, for swimming, changing the model of a dual meet in college to make it more exciting and have the cadence better. We have great examples that for some reason people just aren't looking at the blueprint of what success left and its clues with Nebraska. They had a brilliant idea to put their volleyball team in the football stadium and they sold out the event. And I haven't seen really anyone mimic that entity at all. Like if you reposition some seasons to lead into the other sports, if you look at what success left in their clues with volleyball, even other sports like obviously they're not a college model, but you look at like the Savannah Bananas, they're filling out Angels Stadium when the Angels aren't even filling out their own stadium for the MLB. So there are models in sports that we can be looking at, but I think it just requires a little bit more accountability, a little bit more discipline, more willpower, effort, and attention. And I think that just needs to be on the forefront of everyone's mind as we move forward together into this positive change, because it's not going to happen in one day. It can't happen by just one person. It's going to take a collective community with each sport and within each sport to move forward in the best way possible.
And you mentioned moving forward. Where do you hope college sports goes from here?
Yeah, I hope it provides new opportunities and autonomy for athletes to really create their futures outside just the sport of play. Change can affect everyone forward and backwards, but change is meant to happen and is our only constant in life. So moving forward, I think that's the entity of rallying around that for what it could serve for those people that can benefit from it. And if it was from an earlier time before 2016, then that's just the nature of the beast. Like these aren't decisions that I made. These aren't decisions that any athlete made. These weren't discussions that any athlete had at the seat of the table. And it's just a matter of how our judicial system operates. And I think once people understand that it's not an attack on everyone, that really moving forward, NIL isn't just the cure for all this to be rectified. It's really to combat against, what's going on and to allow this to grow going forward and to reshape. I'm sure this won't be the final stop. If it is, then there's an issue in that. But this is the step to allow us to grow the furthest going forward and to attempt to rectify what was wrong in the past. But we can't change everything in the past. We can just learn from it, acknowledge it, and rectify it and correct it to have a better future.